Hi, my name is Dave Reske, CEO of Nowspeed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we talk about the best ideas of digital marketing. And my guest today is Frank Days, a fractional CMO and self-described ARR growth driver with a wealth of experience in senior marketing leadership and recently AI and AI workflows. Frank, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, David.
I love the way that you talk about the ARR growth in your LinkedIn bio, because that's kind of what every B2B SaaS tech company wants, isn't it? They just want to grow revenue, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the growth is at a premium right now too, with the economy growing, but kind of maybe going sideways a little bit. Every dollar of new revenue and new ARR is precious.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a CMO, you're focused on things that matter to the business rather than talk about esoteric, maybe marketing things about branding and strategy and communications and all the other things we could talk about as marketers. But
Yeah, it's true. It's the companies that I've been involved with kind of in that sweet spot of 20 to 100 million have often been in growth mode and been very, very focused on the practical part of marketing, which is building pipeline and helping to support the growth of the business. Things like brand and communications and social are important. They're a key component of it, but ultimately the numbers and the bottom line tend to be what everyone board level and investors tend to be laser focused on right now.
yeah, absolutely. Well, you and I have been having a great conversation about AI and specifically AI workflows. And I really enjoyed that conversation because a lot of CMOs I talk to are in the mode of still a couple of years into AI, at least, the chat GPT style of AI. They're a little experimental. They're starting to think about like tests or trials or things like that. And you've got a long way toward practically implementing AI and AI workflows for your clients. And I'm excited about this conversation. I just want you to start by just talking about how did you get started with AI workflows? How did that become part of your skill set?
Yeah, I had, I don't want to say an epiphany, but one of those questions of existential questions back in the spring where I was starting to think about, as a marketer, how has my world changed? And are my skills still relevant at all? Do companies need CMOs or do they need a marketing team? And, if you're like me, many times I read my LinkedIn feed and it's all full of how we replaced half of our marketing team with an army of agents and how we've totally transformed marketing. And I think that to some degree, AI is really helping improve the productivity of marketing, but um, it hasn't, we've still got a ways to go. So how did I get here? And so I decided, you know what, I should try to figure out how all of these agents work and could I actually build agents to help me be much more productive in my fractional practice. So I started, like anyone, most people, I started my work with prompts. Just I had a whole library of prompts that I was using, and they were sitting in Google Docs, and they were just really difficult to manage because, oh, I want to build a creative brief, or oh, I want to do a brand review. I got to go find that document or go find that text. And I thought to myself, well, some of these repetitive tasks could be automated and turned into agentic workflows. And so then I played with a number of different tools, like some of the common ones that people are familiar with, like Zapier and et cetera. And I ended up landing on a tool called N8N. It's an open source workflow tool. They're a company headquartered in Berlin, and they have a pretty large community. They have, if you know open source software, they have 150,000 plus stars on GitHub. It's a really popular open source framework. So started started just basically by looking at some of the things I was doing and figuring out what I wanted to automate.
Wow. So you kind of got into it that way. So what's wrong? Let's just start off with, what's wrong with a strategy where you're just working with a product like ChatGPT or Gemini and you're putting your prompts in there, getting the answers back, and it's helping you be more productive. Why should marketers think about moving to agents and connecting the dots and
Yeah,
using these things together? What's the case for that?
a couple of things. I mean, first of all, I still do stuff from prompts every day. Like my Claude is my preferred LLM and it's open every day. And I still do a lot of things with it right from the prompt. If it's something that's hands-on, ad hoc, because sometimes it's multiple. Sometimes I'll write something using my writing agent and I'll take it and I'll stick it into Claude to do some final fit and finish stuff to it. So there's nothing wrong with working from a prompt. However, if it's something that's repeatable, if it's something that you're trying to do at scale or velocity, it can go faster by, I come back to my point of I've created a writing agent that does everything that I would do manually through prompts. It does as an agentic workflow. So you can stick in a title and an outline and a persona and a target audience, and it will go through the process of doing deep research, doing keyword research. We'll create an outline, write the post, check the fact, all the steps that you would do individually, it does in a workflow in about 8 minutes. So, that's an example of something where it saves me time because if I did it manually, it would probably take me 45 minutes to an hour to do each of those steps sequentially with my own check in the middle. So, um, it comes back to like basic automation, but any process where you can benefit from automation and the repeatable nature of it can benefit from a workflow.
So so agents, we should just really think of as a workflow. It's breaking down the steps of a process into discrete pieces and then automating them and stringing them together. Is that really what
I
the
mean, that's
agents are
kind of the way
in your
that
world?
not in my world, yeah. And I know some
Okay.
people would say it's a little bit more sophisticated than that, but I think a lot of what people are calling agents can be agentic workflows that are workflow, automated workflows. Like the next generation of things could be much more sophisticated where you plug into different systems and have it go and automatically, I'll give you an example of kind of a quasi agentic workflow that we've built for one of my clients is using clay.com, which has a bunch of AI technology built into it. They call it their Claygent, right? Which, excuse me, you can visit, you can put a tracking pixel on your website. It can identify the account that comes and then go grab some contacts in that account and then start nurturing. It has workflows for nurture. It also can connect up with other tools like Smart Lead and others to try and really create personalized outreach based upon some visit your site all the way through to sending some emails and if you want to use a tool like HeyReach, connecting to them. So the agents are really in some ways the glue that connects a bunch of these tools that are really productive and really useful. But together it makes the process much more cohesive.
Yeah, it sounds really powerful. So I think one of the things our listeners might be thinking is, do you have to be a programmer to do this? I mean, if I, didn't study computer science, if I, don't have an engineering degree, is this really something I could tackle? Or is it really, only for people who have got professional CS degrees?
So I'm a liberal arts guy by education for undergrad, and I studied chemistry as an undergrad major, and I also have an MBA. So I do sort of have some of that sort of left brain, right brain kind of ethos, but I am not a coder. I don't play one on television. I've never studied a day of computer science in my life, and I was pretty convinced when I started to hear about all this vibe coding stuff, could I do it myself? And at first, it was a bit of a challenge trying to get the workflows going, trying to get APIs connected was probably the hardest part. But once I got them connected, and I've got now a library of tools that I tend to use, my own tech stack, and I've got a series of workflows, and I do a lot of copying and pasting. I do a lot of, take this workflow, upload it to Claude and say, hey, Claude, I want to create a workflow that does something. Like I'll give you an example. I want to take a workflow that I created that will do a complete marketing audit of your marketing and turn it into a brand view agent. So I said, Claude, hey, Claude, take this workflow and update it. Give me simple step-by-step instructions on how to update this and turn it into one that does this and this and this, in this case, brand review. Um, and I say also simple things like say, I am not a coder. I am a marketer. I have no computer science background. Explain it to me in simple step-by-step instructions. Don't update the workflow. And only give me complete code for each node that you change. And it's amazing. And it takes me, so sometimes I might, if I have an existing workflow that does one thing and I want to convert it into something that's kind of similar. Most of my workflows are very similar. They start with a Google form. They, I often send it off to Perplexity to do some research, background research. Then it gets summarized, a new prompt gets created to send it to Claude to do the finish, and then it comes out, it takes the output, formats it in an HTML form, and sends it to you in an email
Hmm.
or uploads it to a Google Doc. Pretty simple workflows, but it's basically, automating your prompts for lack of a better description. And that's, I think that, excuse me, agents are a whole lot more complex than that, can be a whole lot more complex than that. But for the workflows and the things that we're doing right now, they're really quite helpful. They can save a lot of time.
So what are some examples of your favorite workflows? Maybe the use cases that you think are,
Sure.
marketers may want to tackle first.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that I built that I really like and we use a lot is a content strategy builder. So you can put in your company, you can put in three pain points and the persona you're going after, and it will create a content map across across the x-axis. It'll have the five stages of the buyer's journey. Down the y-axis, it has 3 to 5 pain points, and then in each box, it brainstorms three ideas. It gives you three ideas for content that you create to fulfill that part of the buyer's journey. And then what often happens is we take that and use that as the basis for like a blog or a ebook or a white paper or some other or buyer's guide or something like that. Then what I'll often do is I might take that title and go hand fit it for a second. I'll go over to a prompt and say, hey, I want to write a blog about this topic for this persona, roughly this length. Create an outline for me. So I
Hmm.
take the outline and I put the outline. It comes back with an outline and I'll look through it and I'll handcraft it a little bit because I don't agree or it does funny things sometimes. And I take that and I put it into my writing agent, which does all the things I talked about before. So, if you do it all together, I like the brainstorming tool, the content strategy tool, because it's really great for a conversation with the team. We'll sit down with my product marketing manager and my demand gen leader and one of my clients, and we'll sit and we'll go, we like this one best, or we like this one best. And these, we're not there yet. Like these LLMs are not perfect. They're far from perfect. Anyone who's used them repeatedly finds mistakes all the time. So we will often pick the 5 to 7 things we're trying to build, and then then I'll build the outlines, and then I'll crank it in there and get it to go. And I just wrote a blog about this the other day. Is like, as marketers, it used to be the bottleneck was in creating content, getting a subject matter expert to actually write the blog post or write the white paper. The bottleneck is now shifted for right now. I can create the content. We can create the outline and get a really good feature complete draft, one that's probably between 80 and 90%. I'll get a subject matter expert to review it. They'll give you like 10 or 15 comments. I take the comments and I use the comment. I'll curate the comments and then use them with the LLM and ask me to write another draft. And then I send it back to the SME. And I did this with 2 blogs for one of my clients last week. And the first draft, they were both like, I don't get it. I don't think so. There's like issues. And then I fixed all the issues and I sent it back and said, wow, this is much better. And it reads, I do some things to the text to try to humanize it as well, so it doesn't look like an AI wrote it. And it's remarkable, really. It's allowed us to crank content that would take weeks is now takes days. And
Yeah.
and again, the biggest challenge for us oftentimes is getting someone to review the content, subject matter experts.
Yeah. So
That's
You talked about like the bottleneck was the writing. Is the bottleneck now the subject matter expert's review, or is the bottleneck in the strategy? Where do you see the?
No, strategy, I feel like I have lots of tools to help me improve the strategy and
Yeah.
create the strategy and brainstorm and things like that, and ideate. That's not a great challenge. Um, Getting someone to read it, and like we use both of my clients, we use a modified agile process, and we have a Kanban board which has, swim lanes for each stage. Both clients, the biggest section on the board is the review column. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's there's not started, in process, review, and then done. The review column right now is got to be the biggest column
Mm-hmm.
because we can crank the content actually much faster than we've ever done before.
Right.
All the things that you can do on the content creation side, AI is really good at helping you. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to be an expert. Like content curation, being a curator is super important. As a marketer, our roles have changed. And it's funny because a friend of mine who's a software developer sent me the same thing he had said, "Hey, my job used to be writing code, and now my job is instructing AI what to do, and it writes the code and I'm reviewing the code." So
Mm-hmm.
productivity doubles.
Right.
And that's
I'll become managers. So if you were an individual contributor, now you have a staff that you're
exactly.
managing, and a staff is your AI
Yeah,
agent.
I mean, look, if you were a junior person doing some of this stuff, I think it's a challenge, right? I imagine writers, people don't need as many designers or as many writers as they once had.
Yeah. But they still need editors and
Still need editors and
yeah.
you still need reviewers. And, you know, uh, one of my clients was doing a lot of work with AI, but they didn't have a marketer on their staff, and they were doing stuff. But, I'll give you an example. I got into a debate with one of the guys on the team about a landing page. And I said to the person, "This landing page is not good. It's not good. There are issues with it." And he said, "Well, AI says it's good." And I used all the recommendations. And I said, "Well, forget about AI for a second. Let's go into HubSpot and look at it. You had 120 people visit the page and you had zero form fills. I don't need AI to tell me that that's a problem. I still like, in this case, AI is great at giving me 12 things that I could try. But I can tell you right now, I don't need AI to tell me there's too many words on the page or the headline's wrong or you got too many fields. You're asking for 12 fields worth of information. I don't need AI to tell me that.
Yeah.
So, um,
Well, there's definitely still a role for that human expert who knows what good is. Because I think that, in my experience, you can create all kinds of stuff with AI, but if you don't know what good is,
absolutely.
then you're in trouble.
Absolutely.
Let me come back to the work that you've done with these agents. What are the limits that you've found? Like what, as a non-programmer, as a marketer writing this, what limits have you found in these agents? Do you feel like they can kind of, is there like, is it the review cycles that you're building in? Is it the technologies, the speed? How do you feel it's limiting today, and what would you like to see happen that kind of breaks through some of those limits?
Yeah, I mean, one of the limits is that I kind of create them all so they're linear. So it's like,
Mm,
hey, I fill out a form and I get an output out the other end. I don't, I haven't really built in a lot of, oh, just adjust this or adjust that. That was some feedback I got on from someone last week on one of the agents that I got. If it goes off and does, you I'll give you an example. One of my clients is open source software company, and they're in an their open source project is community based through the Apache Software Foundation, and all of their keywords had the name of the project in front of them. And that there are keywords that they care about that are beyond those things. But yet my SEO agent, the keyword agent came back and it spit out. Or I had another one tried it last week and they came in with a bunch of keywords that just were not right. They just were wrong because it misinterpreted something on their website. So
mhm.
um, it depends. Part of it is garbage in, garbage out. Part of it is how much content is out there in the ether. How much content is out there in the public domain? What's it being trained on? I've tried to write about things where there's not a lot of content. If you're in a narrow subject area, sometimes AI will come back and parrot language from one of your competitors' websites, or or cite a survey that your competitor did, but you don't want to cite in a blog post. So, it's we're far from perfect right now. I mean, things are so much better now than they were like a year ago in
Yeah.
terms of just writing and the effectiveness of writing. Like I would say, I tend to lean into Claude a little bit because I feel like it does a little bit of a better job writing. But ChatGPT, the last couple of times I've played around with ChatGPT, it's done a lot better because again, they're updating their models regularly
Yeah.
and frequently.
It's becoming so much more effective. Um,
Completely.
what you know, as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, I've talked to a lot of CMOs who are still in the experimentation phase.
Mhm.
Maybe they're still trying to figure out where the guardrails are, and maybe they're doing some training. Why do a lot of marketers ignore this capability? Why are they still, taking baby steps when they could be taking big steps in
Yeah, I
in
don't know
some?
if they're ignoring it as much as they're just, most people are at the prompt level.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of vibe coding or you're trying to write workflows seems a little scary for the reason we talked about at the beginning that no, most of these folks came up through communications or product marketing or the technologist or they're not coders. And if you're not a
Yeah.
coder, it seems really I've shown probably a half a dozen people. I've made this offer to a number of my friends where I'd get on Zoom call and show them how to build the workflows. And I've handed them a workflow and it's just it still can be pretty daunting.
Yeah.
And the technologies are far from perfect. APIs are not documented well. When you're vibe coding, oftentimes you'll say, "Hey, Claude, here's what I built." And I can take the error message out of N8N, stick it into Claude and say, "Oh, the problem is blah, 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 blah. Here's the updated code." Paste in the updated code. It's still broken. You paste in the error and say, "Oh, it says it," excuse me, it says it very confidently, but the interfaces change. Models can be trained on data that's 6 months old or older, and it's not a lookup search. It's a probabilistic model that they're tuned on. So they're giving you the answer that's most likely. It's not the answer that's certain. So we've got a ways to go. Will we get to perfection? I think that's the bet that everyone's making with these massive investments in data centers and chips and models and everything that's being invested. There's a belief that it's going to get there, but we're not there yet. We're probably, for marketers, probably a few years away from that. I don't even know, like, if you start to think about technology adoption, technology evolution, we're in the early stage of AI technology adoption, at least from the marketing space. The dominant design has not yet emerged. That's an inflection point. That's when people agree to what the standard things are. People are still thinking, oh, I have my marketing automation tool and I'm going to graft some AI onto it. Well, that's the way that people are working today. And there's so many tools, right? It's Scott Brinker's list of thousands, tens of thousands of tools, or whatever the number is. There's so many tools right now, and that's the product innovation side. At some point, it's going to consolidate down to a small number of tools that we all as marketers use standardly, and then it'll be who can run these tools better, who can execute better. Right now, I think what scares people away is there are so many tools. Where do you start? Where do you do it? What are we going to use? One of the things I think more and more about is looking at Satya Nadella's comment about SaaS dead or SaaS is dead. His point was with agents, will you need SaaS? Can we deconstruct these products? A lot of the reasons why you need SaaS is the interface or managing infrastructure at scale. But a lot of these workflows, you end up paying for a massive bloated product that does probably 50% more than you want, or it's probably only 20 or 30% that motivated you to buy it. Can you build a workflow? And this is kind of how I ended up building an SEO and GEO, generative optimization tool workflow that I built. I had built a couple of prompts and then I automated it. And it basically, I was looking at the tools that are the prevailing tools that people use, and you know who they are, and I'm not going to name names, but they can be $300, $400, $500 a month for these tools.
Hmm.
Or I have a mega prompt on my workflow that comes back with keywords, long tail,
Hmm.
strategy, answer engine, generative recommendations with suggestions around content formats. And, so this is, I don't spend $300 on that. Now, it doesn't do everything those tools do, but it does the strategy part, which is super important.
Yeah.
For me as a fractional, I either hire, we hire an agency like yours, David, right? Or we try to DIY, and
Hmm.
the thing is like my clients are often very small. One is a Series A. They're not going to spend, they're not going to hire an agency. They're just not. And founders, often are doing that. I see some founder types who are doing the same thing. They're not marketing experts, but they know they need to do search engine stuff. They want to figure out what some keywords are to write some blogs around. Great.
So
You need tools.
if you're
Yeah,
smart and innovative, you can do a lot of the stuff with some of these tools. And so it's gonna shift the
absolutely.
tools infrastructure quite a bit as people get to know how to do these things. And there'll still be a role for other tools. I can't imagine a world where I can imagine a world where maybe an SEO tool that we're using gets replaced by work directly with the LLMs. I can't imagine where WordPress gets replaced by,
Well, I mean, it's
maybe I'm
interesting
wrong.
question. Maybe it's an interesting question, right? I mean, I am starting to think about maybe building something around the tools that I've built. And,
Hmm.
look, using tools like Cursor and SourceGraph and Replit, you can build unbelievable applications. Like I had a friend who was showing me how to use Replit, and he said, he was trying to build a prototype of a CRM that was a very focused on a very specific vertical market construction companies. And he was in Replit and he said, Replit, build me a CRM for this industry that does this and this and this and this and this. And it built a CRM
Wow.
that was fully functional and did all the things that he wanted to do. Now, was it Salesforce? No, of course not. It doesn't have all the functionality, but it's also not a general purpose platform. If you people are building websites in minutes that do really sophisticated things using these tools like
Yeah.
Cursor and Cloud Code, and there's a whole bunch of them out there. And that's the world. So we may not need WordPress down the road.
We just have a couple minutes left, but it strikes me that one of the interesting things that's happening is that as these tools get very sophisticated, there's this becoming this massive gap between the people who are, there was a massive gap a year ago between the people who could use prompts effectively and the ones that can't. And there's still a group of people that are just barely using the prompts. And now
Mhm.
there's people that are using these even more sophisticated tools. And it feels like there's going to be a massive productivity opportunity for people who can do what you're doing and beyond with these tools, integrating different systems, building hooks, leveraging data connections,
Mhm.
and agentic AI. It's not like a 10% productivity advantage or a 10x. I think we're moving toward like a 100x productivity advantage
I don't
over
know if it's
time.
that much productivity advantage, but it's pretty big. And, you know, a lot of I'll see in help wanted ads will say, hey, we want a AI forward marketing leader who is going to build a small team and be empowered by an army of digital minions, AI digital minions.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's 50 or 100x, but I think it's definitely, my content my product marketing director for one of my clients who coincidentally worked for me in a previous life, he's probably 2 to 3x more productive in content creation now that he's got AI and he's got my writing agent and a bunch of other stuff. I've showed him some stuff and he's been very AI forward and it really accelerates stuff. I mean, really, really, it might not be 10x, but it could be 2 or 3x.
Yeah, amazing.
And
Well, Frank, this has been a great conversation. If people want
thank
to
you.
connect with you and learn more about what you're doing or just share some ideas, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Sure. So I have a blog on Substack. It's vibecodingcmo.substack.com. Check it out. I've been writing about this and other topics. It's been a hobby of mine, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want. I'm there as well, Frank Days. And you can find me there, and I'll be glad to connect with people.
That's great. And we'll put a link to the Substack on this recording as well.
Great.
Frank, thanks again for taking the time. I actually signed up after our last conversation for N8N. I'm going to start getting into this myself, and I'm excited about the journey ahead. So thank you.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure being here, and I look forward to hearing the full recording.
All right. Thanks again.